Working in a behavioral hospital after college, I quickly learned one thing. It felt a lot like working in a prison. The doors were always locked, the courtyards were surrounded by towering high walls, and every movement was carefully monitored. And yet, somehow, chaos always found a way in. One day, I was assigned to the kids unit. This unit was notoriously unpredictable. These weren't just kids, they were survivors of tough lives, full of pent-up energy and a knack for causing trouble. During free time, we'd take them to the courtyard for fresh air and exercise. Basketball was usually the activity of choice, but the staff always kept a close eye on them because with this group, you could never let your guard down. We should have known something was brewing. A small group of kids started whispering at one end of the courtyard, heads huddled together in a tight circle. They'd glance over their shoulders occasionally, trying to act casual. I was about to step in and ask what was going on when, all at once, the huddle broke apart and chaos erupted. It started with a shove. One kid pushed another, and within seconds, a second kid joined in. Before we knew it, fists were flying, screams echoed across the courtyard, and the scene exploded into a full-on brawl. "Code Strong," crackled over the radio. Every available tech sprinted into the courtyard, trying to break up the fight. Kids were yelling, kicking, and pulling at each other as we waded into the fray. It was chaos. And in the midst of all this, no one noticed what was happening on the far side of the courtyard. That's where David came in. David was one of the quieter kids, wiry and small for his age. He was the type you'd think wouldn't cause trouble, but he'd clearly been waiting for this exact moment. While the rest of us were busy pulling kids apart, David darted toward the far wall where a thin drain pipe stretched upward. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. He moved fast, scurrying up the pipe like a cat. "David, stop," I called out, but he was already halfway up. By the time the staff realized what was happening and rushed toward him, he was standing at the top of the wall, balancing precariously on the narrow edge. "David, get down," the therapist called, keeping their voice calm and steady. But David just grinned. With a triumphant wave, he shouted, "Bye," and dropped down to the other side. The courtyard froze for a moment as everyone processed what had just happened. Then came the scrambling, staff fumbling for keys to unlock the heavy gate that led outside. "Who has the keys?" someone shouted. Finally, the gate creaked open, and a group of techs took off after him, sprinting into the open field that stretched beyond the hospital grounds. From my vantage point, I could see David weaving through the tall grass, his small figure darting left and right like a rabbit. He made a sharp turn toward an old drainage pipe sticking out of the ground. "Is he seriously going in there?" I muttered to myself as I watched. Sure enough, David crawled inside the pipe, disappearing into the shadows. By the time the techs reached him, he emerged from the pipe, holding a giant stick. Where he found it, I'll never know, but he held it like a weapon, swinging it wildly to keep everyone at bay. One of the techs stepped forward, hands raised in a calming gesture. "David, we just want to talk. Let's go back inside, okay?" But David wasn't listening. With a sudden swing, he cracked the stick across the tech's head. The sound was sickening. The tech crumpled to the ground, unconscious. I stood frozen, watching from the courtyard window, unable to believe what I was seeing. It was like watching a movie unfold in real time. David looked ready to make another run for it, but instead, in a bizarre twist, he bolted back toward the hospital. What is he doing now? I thought, my heart pounding as I watched him sprint straight for the main entrance. The receptionist barely had time to look up before David darted past her, heading straight for the bathroom. We heard the lock click as he shut himself inside, clearly thinking he'd found the perfect hiding spot. Unfortunately for David, he didn't realize that we had keys. The techs gathered outside the bathroom door, still catching their breath from the chase. One of them jiggled the handle and called out to him, "David, come on out, let's talk." No response. Finally, with a quick motion, the tech unlocked the door. David stood inside, holding the stick like a sword. His eyes darted between the staff and the door, as if calculating his next move. For a moment, it looked like he might fight back again, but then the adrenaline seemed to drain from him all at once. His shoulders slumped, and he dropped the stick with a loud clatter. The techs moved in carefully, gently restraining him and escorting him back to his unit. As we walked through the hallway, the only sound was the shuffle of footsteps and David muttering under his breath, "I'm better than El Chapo. You'll see. You'll all see." By the time we got him settled, the courtyard had been cleaned up, and the injured tech had been taken to urgent care. It was just another day on the psych floor, a place where calm is a fleeting illusion and chaos is always waiting around the corner.